There are 4 new confirmed cases of people getting sick from vaping here in the Northwest. 2 are right here in Oregon. The others in Spokane County. They all ended up with severe lung disease. Across the country, hundreds of people have become sick with these vaping-related illnesses.
Well, a 7th person has died in the U.S. from a vaping illness. Investigator Kristen Severance is here to verify what we know so far about these cases.
So much information to keep track of during this developing story. So let's start with the states who have reported vape-related deaths. Up to 7 cases now. California has 2 deaths. Here in Oregon, a middle-aged man died after using a cannabis cartridge that he purchased from a dispensary. The other states to report vape-related deaths: Kansas, Minnesota, Illinois, and Indiana. Now let's talk about people getting sick. Nearly 400 cases have been reported. The CDC is now coordinating its effort to really investigate this. They also put together a mobile command center where they can, better share information when it comes to trying to pinpoint the exact cause of this. Now, health officials are saying many of the 400 people that have gotten sick because of this, they have used oil laced with THC in their vape pen. Now let's talk about the cities and states who have banned flavored e-cigarettes. San Francisco was the first. They enacted a ban earlier this summer, followed by Michigan. They did their ban earlier this month. And then just on Sunday, the governor of New York said he wants to ban flavored e-cigarettes, but he does not want to ban menthol flavored e-cigarette liquid. The CDC, FDA, they are saying while they investigate, they recommend that people stay away from all vaping products. Do you have something you want us to verify, vape related or not? Please let us know. Email us, verify@kgw.com.